If you only try the things you believe you can do, you'll only accomplish the things you already knew you could do. But if you give yourself permission to fail, you're free to try the things that seem completely beyond your reach. And that's when magic happens. Welcome to Pebbles of Light, where we highlight the everyday people who bring hope, comfort, and light to others. I'm your host, Maxson, sharing meaningful stories to help you find light in your journey. If the messages shared resonate with you, please follow, share, or support the podcast through Patreon to help keep the mic on and spread the light even farther. Hey everyone, it has been a minute or a couple years. Pebbles of Light was kind of out of the loop for a little bit. I had a few other things going on in my life and wasn't able to do as much of the podcast recording as I wanted to. And so I had to step back, but I've been feeling the nudge for about a year, honestly, to get back into it. And so I'm grateful for the chance to be back. Putting together the little intro video that I did for this just reminded me of all the amazing people that I've connected with over the years. And there's new people that I've met in the past couple of years. I'm so excited to share some of their stories with you through this podcast. One of the main things I've been working on while I've been gone is I started a company. It's called Effective. And what it does is it is a patient engagement and medication management software solution. It helps patients know how to take their medications and just helps monitor them to make sure that they're getting the support that they need as they start a new medication. I've seen a lot of issues with friends and family who come to me because they aren't able to contact their provider for whatever reason. And so they come to me and ask me about what's going on with their medications. And it started to frustrate me that we weren't doing more to support patients in this way. And so that's why I started that company. It's been interesting. I'm definitely not like a company starter person. It's really pushed me out of my comfort zone in a lot of ways. I talked about this a little bit in an interview that I did on a podcast called Tech Talks by a software company called In Time Tech. I'll link that in the show notes so you can find it. But the other thing that I've learned a lot about starting a company is the importance of giving yourself permission to fail. And so that's what I wanted to talk about in this first episode back. And kind of along with that is even the idea of permission to fail with the podcast. It's been so long and now there's all these new things and you're supposed to do video and all these things. So I'm doing the video and it's a little intimidating, I guess, is the best way to phrase it. But I wanted to talk about that idea of giving yourself permission to fail and talk about 3 different tools that can help you as you give yourself permission to fail. For the record, the phrase permission to fail comes from one of our family's favorite books by J. Scott Savage. Mysteries of Cove is the name of the series. It's the first book in the series. It's called Gears of Revolution. And we'll talk about that again a little bit further on. But throughout my life, I have failed, right? I think we all have different things where we don't achieve the outcome that we think that we will. And it even goes back to high school. When I was in high school, my good friend and I had this big plan that we were going to find the cure for cancer. And we went off to college and I got to college and I was like, I don't know if I want to be a doctor, which was a little tricky because my grandma had been calling me Dr. Ann since I was 5 years old. And so I decided, okay, well, I'll get a different kind of doctorate. I'll just do the PhD. Not necessarily easier. And so I started a PhD program and it was in Chicago. And I moved from where I grew up in Minnesota down to Chicago to go to this PhD program. And while I was down there, I started to feel a bit unsettled again. And I wondered if that was the right place for me to be. And I wasn't really like a super prayerful person at the time, but I remember very vividly feeling this need to figure out what I should do with my life. And if there was a God, I wanted his insight on what I could do to be an instrument in his hands to help better the world in one way or another. And so I remember kneeling down, which definitely wasn't a thing that I did back then, to say a prayer and saying, hey, God, if you're there, can you help me, figure out what it is I want to do? I've got accepted into this amazing program, but I'm not sure if it's the right thing for me. And a little bit after that, I decided that I was going to switch programs. The program that I was in was in cancer biology. So I figured, that's aligned with that goal that I had with that friend. But I decided I wanted to switch and do toxicology instead. I tried to justify it to my 15-year-old self of being, toxicology. It's like instead of helping cure cancer, you're going to help prevent it with people not getting as sick. And so I decided that I was going to switch schools. So I quit the school in Chicago and I transferred to a school in upstate New York, and I started up there. In the middle of all this, while I was in Chicago, I started to get a little homesick. I'm from northern Minnesota, up in the woods, essentially. And Chicago is nothing like the forest. And I lived right downtown. And I started to just try and find ways to connect with people back home. And I reached out to a friend that I'd known since I was little. And I said, "Hey, what'd you decide to do after you graduated?" And he said, "Oh, I moved to Utah. I'm working on the bobsled track for the Olympics." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's super cool." And he said, "I've actually been going to a different church up here." And he and I had gone to youth Bible camps together and growing up in the same church. And I was kind of like, "Oh, what church are you going to?" I was like, "Utah. That's some religion, but I have no idea what it is." And he said, "Oh, it's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints." And he said, "It's pretty cool though. Like you should check it out. It aligns a lot with the things that we were raised with, but it just kind of adds a little bit more to the story." And I said, "Well, okay." So I started trying to learn on my own a little bit more about the church, ended up joining the church prior to moving to Rochester. So I got up to Rochester and started the toxicology program. It was great. It was a really amazing program that they have up there. And I was going through all the different things, and I started to get kind of that unsettled feeling again of, I don't know if this is the right spot. Like when you just like your true north just doesn't feel like it's there. And so I knew that I needed to make some changes or think about things. But I also knew that I had this family, not responsibility, expectation, I guess, this family expectation to get a doctorate. But honestly, I felt like I didn't want the jobs that went with that doctorate degree. And so I started wondering, oh, I've been a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints at that point about a year, which is when, if you join the church, you need to be a member of the church for a year before you can leave and serve a mission. And I thought, oh, well, I'm going to go serve a mission. Like that's a perfect excuse to quit school, is to go serve a mission. And so I thought about doing that. But every time I prayed about whether or not I should serve a mission, the answer was no. And eventually I got to the point where I was like, okay, I need to quit this graduate school program and figure out something else to do with my life for right now. And so I decided to quit. I like 100% quit and took some time. It was Christmas time actually. And then I ended up thinking, well, what about a mission now? And so I prayed about serving a mission at that point, and the answer that time was yes, that I should serve a mission. And I'm so grateful for that, having stopped school prior to feeling the need to serve a mission, because my family was pretty upset with me. They are not members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And my mom and my grandmother, my maternal grandmother especially, were very upset with my decision to, in their mind, quit school in order to serve a mission. But I was grateful that I could honestly say that I did not quit school in order to serve a mission, that I was planning to quit school anyway. And so I started 2 PhD programs. I realized that going into Chicago, I had this idea that I was going to graduate with a PhD in cancer biology. And then going to Rochester, I would graduate with a PhD in toxicology. But none of those happened. So, in some perceptions, you could say that I failed. I didn't achieve the outcome that I had set out to do. However, the time in Chicago helped motivate me and put me in a situation where I was able to reach out to my friend who was able to talk to me about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And then when I was in Rochester, I was able to connect with the missionaries there and work with them a lot, which helped me prepare and be more excited to serve a mission. So even though the outcome that I had expected didn't happen, it was the right outcome for me and for my life. So I think tool number one is to redefine failure as a course correction. There's a quote by Richard G. Scott that says, "I testify that when the Lord closes one important door in your life, he shows his continuing love and compassion by opening many other compensating doors through your exercise of faith. He will place in your path packets of spiritual sunlight to brighten your way. They often come after the trial has been the greatest, as evidence of the compassion and love of an all-knowing Father. They point the way to greater happiness, more understanding, and strengthen your determination to accept and be obedient to his will." So I had those doors close. those opportunities to get the PhD with those different programs, but other doors opened, and those doors led to such a huge impact in my life. That said, it doesn't mean that going through those new doors that opened made life easy. There was still difficulties. I had to manage disappointing my family. Like I said, they were pretty upset with me choosing to leave. My grandmother actually took my hands in hers and she said, "Annie, girl, if you go and you serve this mission, you'll break my heart." And I said, "Grandma, I'm sorry. It's what I know that I need to do." And then I went to go meet with my bishop, the leader of my congregation that I attended in upstate New York. And I said, "Hey, I want to serve a mission." I was so excited. And he said, "That's great. How are you going to pay for it?" I don't know how I didn't know, but I had no idea that missionaries paid to serve a mission. I was completely blindsided. And I had no idea how I would come up with the funds to do that. However, my friend who had joined the church, who was in Salt Lake, had introduced me to some of his friends, and I'd become very close with one of these families. And I reached out to him. I had no intention of asking for money or anything like that. I was just calling to give a quick life update. And I said, "Hey, I'm calling to let you know I'm serving a mission." And he said, "That's cool. We're going to pay for it." And I said, uh, "Okay." like, um, it just caught me completely off guard because missions aren't cheap. And so the idea that this person who I knew somewhat well, but only for a few months, was willing to say, "Okay, that's amazing. I'm so glad you want to serve a mission. Let my family pay for it." So that was just an answer to prayer of things coming in. And for the record, I've actually interviewed that person as well as my friend who had moved to Salt Lake, and that is episode 27. So you should check that out. It gives a little bit more backstory to this side of the story as well. So jumping forward a little bit, my imagined future had changed a lot in just a short 2.5 years. And it helped me recognize that sometimes failure is part of progression. So that's tool number 2, is to recognize that failure is part of progression. And I got to my mission. I had an amazing time. As I was kind of winding up my mission, I wasn't sure what I would do next because a lot of times people go when they're younger. I was 24. I was pretty old for a missionary. And I just had a lot of questions trying to determine what it is that I should do after my mission. It didn't make sense to go back to Minnesota because I hadn't lived there since high school. It didn't make sense to go back to Rochester because I wasn't planning on continuing school there. And I'd been thinking about those things one morning and we were driving in the car. And all of a sudden, I just had this impression in my mind of, "Anne, you're exactly where you're supposed to be." And I kind of questioned it. I thought, well, 2.5 years ago, I didn't even know anything about this church. And now I'm a missionary. Like, how did that even happen? And I had the impression come to my mind of, "I know you. I know what you're capable of, and I knew that you would make the choices that would lead you to this spot where you can be an instrument in my hands." And the impression, using that word instrument, brought me immediately back to the prayer that I'd said in Chicago, asking for guidance to know what it is that I could do to become an instrument in the hands of God. It was an amazing moment just to recognize that those failed opportunities in graduate school were actually part of that course correction and part of that progression in helping me learn and understand what God is trying to tell me to do. So a number of months later, I wrapped up my mission. My mom came to pick me up and she loved it. I was excited for the opportunity to bring her around and have her meet all of the people that I had taught. And she loved the opportunity to connect with different people. And I remember her telling me, "Wow, you really speak Spanish." It's like, "Well, yeah, that's all I've done for 18 months, Mom." So it was a really neat opportunity to connect with her. My grandmother also softened to this idea of me joining the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and even serving a mission. She just ended up having such a wonderful feeling about the church and understanding what it was that made it so important to me. And for me, that was a miracle as well. That as we move forward with faith in those things that seem complicated, we'll see miracles. And for me, that was one of those miracles. And we all are going to have our own seemingly miraculous tasks that the Lord asks us to accomplish, whether that's finishing a college degree serving a mission or overcoming addiction or battling chronic illness or changing jobs or finding a spouse or moving. The list goes on and on and on. But if failure is part of that progression, that's where we need to think about that idea of giving ourselves that permission to fail. So the quote from the book, that's the title of this episode, says, "If you only try the things you believe you can do, you'll only accomplish the things you already knew you could do. But if you give yourself permission to fail, you're free to try the things that seem completely beyond your reach. And that's when magic happens." So what would you do if you gave yourself permission to fail? What would be something that you would be like, okay, I'm going to go try that thing? Take a minute and just think about that, what you would do, and think about ways that you can try that thing. Kevin J. Worthen said, "Your mortal experience will be a more productive part of your quest for perfection if you intentionally stretch yourself with new challenges, especially those that involve a real risk of failure." So you have to be intentional about it. So having started a business, there's a lot about this idea, right? The idea of fail fast and, just kind of throw it on the wall and see what sticks and see how it works and all these different things. And that for me has been, for a long time, it was difficult. It's starting to become more freeing of this idea of, all right, we'll just put it out there. It's not perfect. It's okay. I'm going to put it out and see what happens. But you have to be intentional about it. You have to be intentionally stretch yourself, is what Kevin Worthen says, in order to find ways to expand our opportunities and the ways that we can grow in this life. For the record, I did eventually earn that title of Dr. Ann after getting a doctorate degree. My grandmother was still alive at the time. I was so grateful for that opportunity and for her to be able to come to my graduation and to finally call me Dr. Ann. It's just kind of a quick aside on that. My grandmother called me that for a long time. So at 5, I'd kind of started it. I said, I wanted to know if girls could be doctors too, because I hadn't seen a lot of girl doctors at that time. And from then on, she was like, yes, they can. And she started calling me Dr. Ann. We went on a couple of bus tours and she would introduce me to people as, "This is my granddaughter, Annie, and she's going to be a doctor. So feel free to call her Dr. Ann." And for a long time, I thought of it as pressure and expectation. And for the record, I'm the only grandchild on that side as well. So all of the pressure was landing on me. And I struggled a bit with that and kind of wanted to push against it sometimes. However, I came to understand a little bit later that it wasn't necessarily that she was trying to put pressure on me to achieve this thing. It was that her opportunities were limited. She was born in the 19 teens, right? I think she was born in 1918, somewhere in there. And as she got older, her husband was in World War II, and she went to work because he was gone. And when he came back, she kept working. And she was very good at math. She did bookkeeping for one of the largest school districts in Minnesota. And she was vilified by her friends for choosing to work. And I think she knew that my opportunities would be different, that society had shifted, society had changed, and they would allow me to become whatever it is I want to be. And according to 5-year-old me, I wanted to be a doctor, and 15-year-old me, right? And so she was trying to just encourage that. It wasn't pressure. So just a quick aside there about my grandmother, who was amazing. So last, I want to talk a little bit about tool number 3, which is to rely on heavenly help to strengthen you during times of uncertainty. So I got that doctorate degree and then fast forward a number of years and got married, had kids, and we'd moved up to Idaho, and my husband had decided that he wanted to go back to school. So he goes back to school and I'm working full time. I didn't want to work full time. I had kind of this end in sight. I was like, oh, I've only got to work this many more months and then I'll be able to take a step back and focus on my role as a mom with my kids. But unfortunately, that timeline kept getting extended as far as like being able to schedule board exams for my husband and a number of different things. And I remember driving to work in tears and being like, "Oh, I'm such a horrible mom. I yelled at my kids in the car and I only get this many minutes with them before I have to go to work. And then sometimes I don't even see them after work." And I would just beat myself up about it quite a bit. And so I was trying to figure out what to do. One of those mornings I was driving to work and I was kind of looking forward to that idea of like, okay, at this point I can switch roles. And what should I do? Like when my husband is done, like when he's finished all of his boards and he gets a job, what should I do? Should I switch to just working a little bit? Should I work at all? Should I work part-time? And I wasn't getting any insight on what I should do. And so I instead decided to, you know, pray and think about, okay, well, what can I do to strengthen my relationship with my kids? How can I help what I feel, I don't think it was, but what I had felt had been damaged by those times where I was trying to balance too many things. And the response that I got was put in your notice at work. And I'm not, just for the record, I'm not saying working out of the home is bad. That is not what I'm saying at all. It's different in every circumstance. And I still work out of the home, obviously. Um, but in that moment, at that time, I felt like I needed to be home. I needed to put in my notice at work. And my response to that impression was, what about the whole thing that my husband needs to finish his board exams and find a job, like at least get it lined up? Did you miss that part in the question? And the simple answer came to my mind of have faith and move forward. So I did. I put in my notice at work and we were trying to figure things out. My husband was still working on getting board exams taken care of and looking around for a job that would be a good fit for our family. When I put in my notice, it was May and we get to August and he still hadn't found a job yet. And August was my last day. And we used to have a calendar that we would hang up in our house that had like everything that was going on for the month. And I just didn't write anything because I was like, I don't know. And it stressed me out that I wasn't sure what was going to be happening. But I was trying to have faith and move forward and know that this is what I was feeling inspired to do, was to quit my job, even though my husband also didn't have a job lined up. Ironically, at this time, we also had the goal to move, which seems slightly ludicrous considering that neither one of us had a job and I had willingly just quit a job. But I also had in my mind, well, faith without works is dead, so I might as well start packing. We have a lot of books. And so I was like, oh, I'll just start on the books. So I start packing up all these different books and trying to get everything settled so that eventually we would move. I had no idea when, but I knew it would come. While I was packing, I came across my very first copy of the Book of Mormon that I'd been given by the missionaries back in Chicago. Carefully tucked within its pages was a little note from the missionaries, as well as a ticket to General Conference, which I went to in Salt Lake City the day after my baptism. And that tender mercy of just finding that little package reminded me of all the many times while choosing to join the church and choosing to serve a mission and so many other things that I needed to have faith first and then take that step into the dark, make that leap. There's a quote by S. Michael Wilcox where he says, somewhere in the past of your life, experiences have been placed by a wise and foresighted Father in heaven to prepare you to face the very things you are facing. And that was exactly what I needed. That was my opportunity to recognize and remember those experiences where I'd been given divine direction. And as I had faith, I moved forward and things worked out. So I knew that things would work out as I continued to move forward in trying to figure out what would happen with work and all the things. And surprise, they did. A year later, the following August, everything had kind of fallen into place. We were able to move. My husband had a job. I was mostly at home. I was able to focus more on kind of those creative things. And I had the opportunity to teach at BYU Idaho Education Week, which wasn't even on my radar the year before. So it was a really cool experience to see again that as I moved forward with faith and gave myself permission to fail in the outcome I was expecting, that I was able to be led by God to know the things that were best for me and for our family. So as a quick recap on our 3 tools to use when you're giving yourself permission to fail. Number 1 is to redefine failure as a course correction. Number 2 is to recognize failure as a part of progression. And number 3 is to rely on God to strengthen you in times of uncertainty. I know that I still need to be better at this and striving to put myself out there, especially podcast is back, guys. It's a lot of opportunities to give myself permission to fail. There's one more quote by Kevin Worthen where he says, whatever the circumstances you find yourself in, know with assurance that you can succeed. You are more capable, more talented, and more faith-filled than you realized. More important, you are more loved by God than you realize. He has placed you on earth at this time and in this place because he knows you can succeed and that you can help others succeed. I know that's true. I know that you are more capable, more talented, more faith-filled than you realized, and especially that you're more loved by God than you realize, and that you're here for a purpose so that you can succeed and you can help others succeed. All right. First episode back is in the books. This podcast always has a little pebble for every episode. So a little call to action, something to work on or think about. And for this episode, what it is to read one of the talks that is mentioned in the show notes. Many of the quotes in this episode came from these talks, and there's a couple of bonus ones as well. I've done a lot of research on failure, guys. I kind of know what I'm talking about a little bit, but I'm still failing at it. So we'll see what we can do. If you're an audio only and you don't want to find the show notes, just search up Bread or Stones by S. Michael Wilcox. It is one of my absolute most favorite talks. There's 2 by Kevin Worthen. One is called Fear Not, and the other is called Successfully Failing, Pursuing Our Quest for Perfection. And then the last one is on Failing and Finishing by Cassie Budd. And I'll also post them on the podcast social media account, so you'll be able to find them there. But thank you for being here. I'm so excited for season 2. I've got some great guests lined up from a variety of backgrounds and experiences. Some of them are people I've known for years, and some of them are people I've met in this little hiatus that the podcast has had. And I'm so excited to share their messages and the information that they have because they are amazing. That said, if you know someone who has a message about sharing light with others, I'd love to connect with them to learn a little bit more and see if they may be a good fit for the podcast. Thanks so much for being here. Until next time. Thank you for tuning in. My hope is that something helped you feel seen, encouraged, or inspired to bring light to someone else. If a name or moment stood out, don't let it pass. Reach out, express gratitude, or take that next step. You can connect with me anytime on socials at Pebbles of Light or at Maxson.com. If this episode was meaningful for you, please follow the show, rate or review, and share it with someone who might need a lift today. And if you want to go a step farther, you can support the show on Patreon. See you next time.